Hi, welcome to the 6th class of TSD Mindfulness. I'm so glad you're here. We've got a great class for you tonight. I think that you're going to enjoy and get a lot out of the teachings tonight. Let's do a review first from the last class. In the last class, we talked about the gut and the heart fields in more detail. The gut field responds in a binary way, either contentment because all is preserved, or discomfort because certain aspects of your life are at risk for changing. The gut field can be associated with instinct, but what separates instinct from thought is that instinct is something that we are born with, as opposed to something that we learn during our life. However, the gut field often responds as a result of your life experience. So the gut field is not confined to instinct. The gut field does not respond well to our practice of focusing on sights, sounds, and physical sensations. So this is our typical mindfulness practice. The gut does not respond well to a typical mindfulness practice. Instead, the gut responds well to reassurance, which we talked a lot about last time. It is also important to note that the gut field drives our behavior and our relationships with the people and the things in our life, just like the mental field does. So it's just as instrumental in creating and maintaining and affecting our relationships in our lives. So that's why with the TSD mindfulness, we also really focus a lot on the gut field, not just the mind or the mental field. I offered a metaphor last class for the temperamental body. It's a seesaw. The mental field and the gut field are at either end of the seesaw, and they work together in tandem, pulling us between stimulate change, analyze outcomes, put plans into action. So this is the mental field. And at the other end of the continuum, at the other end of the seesaw, is keep everything in your life exactly as it is right now. Don't change a thing. That's the gut field. In the middle of our temperamental body is the pivot point, representing the heart. In the middle of our seesaw is the pivot point, representing our heart, and is where the crux of our experience is. So when we tame our mental field and we soothe our gut field on the other end of the seesaw, then we balance the seesaw and we make it possible for us to move into our hearts. And in the heart exists the reality of our experience. This is where old pain resides and true joy. It's all there in the heart. So tonight we're going to discuss all 3 items on the list called the desires of the temperamental body. The first item on that list of the desires of the temperamental body is the mental field desires change. So that's where we're going to start tonight. The mental field desires change because of free will and the ego. If it were not for change, there would be no options in our lives, and there would be no need for free will or the ego or the mental field for that matter. So the mental field likes change because it gives itself purpose. Specifically, the mental field wants the ability to make a decision, and decisions usually end in some kind of change. Not all the time, but sometimes. The mental field would have no purpose if it were not for change and making decisions, because the mental field analyzes options, reflects on the past, makes projections about the future. It's also creative. So let's be grateful that coupled with our free will, we are also born with this mental field that helps support us to use that will. So not only does the mental field desire change, it also has a wealth of tools at its disposal to institute change. So I'll say that again. Not only does the mental field desire change, it has a wealth of tools at its disposal to institute change. So let's look at the world and what's going on in the world to understand this better. If a large corporation sets out to make a change, it must rely on several different groups of people to guide them through this change. There is a group who analyzes historical data to assess how to go forward. More people make judgments and decisions about whether or not outcomes will be beneficial. And still other people use creativity to develop ideas not yet researched or analyzed or tested. Risk assessment is involved, as well as financial analysis and resource management. So there's all these like analytical type things going on. So this corporation's powerhouse, right, of men and women and the technology that they use is a wonderful outwardly projection of what our mental field does when we entertain change in our own lives. So you maybe already see things like this, and definitely if you start practicing TSD mindfulness, I think you'll see things like this, how things in our world are kind of mirrors or projections of what's going on in our own system. It's these outwardly projections. The mental field reflects on the past and projects into the future and simulates outcomes and makes judgments about risks and rewards, as well as uses creativity to conceptualize designs never thought of before. So this is drawing this parallel between, what this process that a big corporation might go through and then our mental field having those same processes going on. For example, if you are considering moving into a new home, and you will reflect on the homes that you've lived in the past, and consider what you've liked and disliked about them, and then you will consider different options for your new home. And you might also use creativity to open yourself up to a new type of living situation. All right, so that's an example of that process, the mental fields process. Either way, risks will be assessed and so forth, and this process might not be entirely conscious, but you are using your mental field to some degree. Some of you might rely less on your mental field and more on your gut field or even your heart field when you make these decisions. But if you're someone that relies a lot on your logic and these reasoning processes, then a lot of this decision making happens in your mental field. Despite all the benefits of using your mental field, when you practice TSD mindfulness, you actually want to quiet this powerhouse, taking a break from this powerhouse temporarily. So that's part of the practice of TSD mindfulness, and actually the practice of most of mindfulness, traditional mindfulness. The reason is that this powerhouse of reflection and simulation and projections distracts us from what's going on in our gut field and our heart field. So that's why we need to tame this powerhouse so we can focus a little bit more on our gut field and our heart field. The mental field is fixated on what we are doing, opposed to how we are doing it. However, when the mental field does this, it kind of misses the point because much of the time, not all the time, but much of the time, it is not as important what we are doing, but how we are doing it. So that's another tidbit of information to understand about the mental field and how it can get us caught up and how we need to quiet it down for this mindfulness practice. So moving into the heart helps us be conscious of how we are doing what we're doing. The heart is more about how we are doing as opposed to simply what we are doing. So that's another huge important outcome of this practice, is moving into that more focusing of how we are doing what we're doing instead of what we are doing necessarily. And since the mental field is very much associated with will, it is in our best interest to use will to quiet our mental field. If not, our will naturally migrate us, push us into activities associated with change. So I'll say that again. Since the mental field is very much associated with will, it really helps to use will to quiet our mental field. Because if we don't, then the mental field will naturally migrate to some of these processes around making decisions and change and things like that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to talking about the gut field. So that second item on the list of the desires of the temperamental body is the gut field desires preservation. This is quite the opposite, right, of the mental field, which desires change. The gut field desires preservation first and foremost to keep us alive. It is the gut field's primary purpose to keep us alive. You know that the gut field is working if you observe an animal fighting for its life. So what's going on in that circumstance is the gut field has taken over the temperamental body system, right, and is making it so we survive. So if a frog will climb out of a container, a bird will feed itself, a squirrel will flee from a predator, and these creatures are receiving impulses from their gut field telling them to do whatever is in their power to stay alive. So that's the first and foremost desire, I guess is the way to look at it, of the gut field. Interestingly, all vertebrates have a gut field, and some animals have a heart field, and a smaller number of animals have a mental field as well. So you can figure this out by looking at the brain of these animals. For example, a fish has a reptilian complex and a limbic system, but no neocortex. So this indicates that the fish has a gut field and it has a heart field, but it doesn't have a mental field necessarily. There are some other situations that the gut field likes to preserve. All right, it's not just our life. Someone else's life, that would be another example. If you have someone close to you fighting for their own life and their survival, then your gut field's going to really perk up in those situations as well. Our gut field is also interested in our emotional survival. If our gut field senses a situation in which we might become emotionally devastated, it will react with a hard no, like, no, cut it off. No, we cannot be emotionally devastated. It wants to preserve status quo. It's really about the status quo, just preserving everything the way it is. If we have an emotional devastation or emotional hiccup even, the gut field will respond to that. The gut field is also interested in preserving the ego, and therefore will react if your ego is threatened in some way. But here's the thing, emotional and egotistical survival are not always in your best interest. Actually, in some situations, emotional devastation or an emotional hiccup and ego deflation are actually important to moving into perfect relationship. So the TSD mindfulness is really centered around this idea of moving into these perfect relationships. And someday, physical death will be important to moving into perfect relationships. So I'll kind of say that again. These survivals, right, that the gut is like really into, like this physical survival, this emotional survival, this egotistical survival, it's not always in our best interest. So, these kind of like getting deflated, your ego getting deflated, or an emotional kind of like turn down, and sometimes those are big growing moments when we just kind of like go into this emotional downturn and then we come back out like this brand new person, like this butterfly coming out of the cocoon, right? So it's important to realize this, that even though this is how our gut field is set up and it desires this preservation, that preservation is not always what we need to move into perfect relationship. Therefore, it's important that we know how to soothe our guts using TSD mindfulness. Moreover, our gut's reaction to loss of preservation distracts us from our heart field. It makes it difficult or impossible for us to dwell in our heart. So soothing the gut's fear of this change is key to TSD mindfulness practice. All right, so the heart field, the third item on the list of the desires of the temperamental body, is the heart field desires consideration. This isn't consideration like, oh, I'm going to spend some time and really think about this and ponder it. Not that kind of consideration. Consideration as in devout and steady observation. Devout and steady observation. That's it. That's all the heart field really needs from us, is just to be there and to observe in this really devout way, in this steady way. The heart field is our rock. It is the reality of who we are. It does not ask for much, yet at the same time, we do not have great influence over what is in the heart. The heart field only desires us to move our consciousness into it and consider what is there. So I'll say that again. The heart field, although it doesn't need a lot from us, there isn't a lot that we can do to influence the heart. And so we really need to surrender. There's a lot of surrender involved in there. So the heart field only desires us to move our consciousness into it and consider what is there. The heart field desires consideration because your attention in the heart instigates the healing process and the joyful experience. So the healing process and the joyful experience are these two things that we experience that our heart and our soul really want us to experience. And so we can do that when we tame the mind, tame the mental field, soothe the gut, and move into our heart. If you've already done a lot of healing work and are free from trauma, then the joyful experience will be more of your process. So I want to say that because you might have been doing lots of healing work and you're at this point where you're like, I'm complete with that. I don't need to start doing all this healing work again. And that's fine. It doesn't mean if you start practicing TSD mindfulness, you're all of a sudden going to have to go back and do all this healing work. So I wanted to mention that. The healing process and joyful experience leads us to a true sense of purpose, connection, and fulfillment. So the joyful experience and the healing process leads us to a true sense of purpose, connection, fulfillment, and actually I'll mention energy, just feeling energetic. So we cannot fully see what is in the heart until we move our consciousness into the heart. And so that becomes really important. For example, there's something called heart fatigue. It's when our heart field is just tired. And we can't really see that until we get into the heart and observe that. So we're dwelling in the heart. So what happens with this heart fatigue is the heart field often gets tired, which in turn leaves us feeling drained. The heart field is tired because it's not relying on divine flow. So instead of relying on divine flow, we are relying on our mental field and our gut field a little bit too much. And so it's what it ends up happening that ends up really tiring our heart field. But if we can rely more on divine flow, it kind of frees us up a little bit, frees up our mental field, frees up our gut field, opens our heart more, and we won't experience as much of that heart fatigue. It can be really life-changing that within itself. So this all takes a toll on our temperamental bodies, especially your hearts, and we need to rely more on divine flow so we do not become fatigued energetically, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. The remedy for this exhaustion is surrender in our hearts, which is not possible without our devout, and steady attention within the heart field. So the remedy for this exhaustion is just surrendering in our heart by using that devout and steady attention, which is all that our heart wants from us, is that devout and steady attention within our heart. We can't really do that until we tame this thing and we soothe our gut. And we cannot become attentive in our hearts until we move our consciousness into our heart fields. And this movement requires us first to tame our mental field and soothe our gut fields. And this practice takes a sense of worthiness because it's also important. This worthiness is important because dedicating a portion of your day to simply moving your attention into your heart and observing, it's kind of luxurious, right? It seems luxurious to just take time out of your day to simply move your attention into your heart. But the reality is, it's not beyond reach. It could become very routine. It could become as routine as brushing your teeth and as necessary as brushing your teeth. I think when you start doing the practice and start experiencing the benefits of it, you'll see that maybe this isn't so luxurious. This is like really important and like for your survival. So you can do the TSD challenge and see how that goes. Future teachings of TSD mindfulness will offer a thorough explanation of surrendering in the heart and how to instigate this healing process and this joyful experience. All right, so we're ready to go and talk about the meditation and move on to that segment of our class tonight. So let's review a little bit about what we talked about last class about the meditation. We talked about will last time and how to use will in our TSD mindfulness practice. We have will, we have free will. Let's use it to our advantage. We need to use it. We have it, we need to use it. And so let's talk about how we use that to our spiritual benefit, right? There's a lot of spiritual practices out there that kind of like play down the will. You know, will is not part of this, but for this TSD mindfulness, I just like to make it really clear that using your will is part of the practice. And so it's important to know how to do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, just a review from last week. So will is used primarily for 3 acts in TSD mindfulness, and these are focusing, waiting, and trusting. So I'll talk about how we can use will to enhance our focus, our waiting, and our trusting. I invite you to use your will during this meditation to steer your attention, and I'll lead you to do that through the meditation, but to let go of using will for other stuff, right? Other worldly things, other things that have to do with your body, but really using that will to steer your attention, and also for the waiting and trusting, which I'll talk about. So some examples of what you might steer your attention towards in your TSD mindfulness practice is your breath. If you're using your breath to help tame your mental field, or sounds in your environment, if that's what you're using to help tame your mental field, or you will use your will to steer your attention towards physical sensations, if that's what you're using to tame your mental field. You will use your will to steer your attention towards physical sensations in your heart field, not just your physical body. Also steer your attention towards symbols in your heart field and emotions of the heart field. So those are just a few of the things that you'll be focusing your attention on, and using that will to keep your focus on that. So focusing, waiting, and trusting are the key actions that lead to divine flow. When we wait, we use will to stop us from jumping ahead of ourselves and instead simply be in the moment. We can use our will to help us better trust. We do this by using our will to disengage from our logic. So when we're practicing TSD mindfulness, it's good to think about our logic being kind of the opposite of trust. We turn to logic when we do not completely trust. And that's acceptable because there are a lot of things in life that you shouldn't trust. So it's good that we have our logic there to help us through when we aren't able to maybe tap into a divine flow. We need something to help us through life's stuff. However, divine flow can wholeheartedly be trusted. So there is no need to turn to logic when we open up to this flow. In fact, you won't be able to open up to divine flow if you are engaged in your logic. So I'll say that again. You won't be able to open up to this divine flow if you are engaged in logic. So we need to use our will to disengage from our logic. And that basically means taming the mental field. Tonight, I will lead you to notice your breath. In the last class, we focused on physical sensations to tame the mental field. And the class before that, I led you to hear sounds in your environment. So choose what you would like to focus on to tame your mental field, or if you'd like to go along with what I'm going to lead you through, which is to focus on your breath tonight. I will also lead you to embrace uncertainty around 3 events in your life. They can be significant events in your life or things going on that you feel really indifferent about. It doesn't matter. For example, your job or relationship or personal goal are just some suggestions. All right, we're going to go ahead and move into the meditation, move into that part of our class tonight. Find a comfortable seated position. If you prefer to lie down, you can do that. But if you find that you focus better sitting up, then go ahead and do that. Close your eyes. Take in a few relaxing breaths. Inhale. And as you breathe out, feel yourself settle physically. Another inhale. And as you exhale, feel yourself settle mentally. One more focused inhale. And as you exhale, feel your emotions settle. Bring your attention to your breath. Do you feel a tickle sensation in your nostrils? Do you notice the difference of air temperature going into your nostrils compared to the air leaving your nostrils? Notice the rising and falling of your chest as you breathe. Choose an aspect of your breath to focus your attention on. If you notice your attention drift in another direction, exercise your will and choose to focus on your breath. Take a step back and notice the part of your mind that focuses your attention. Notice how this part of your consciousness expresses itself to you. Continue to notice the subtleties of the sensation of your breath or the other aspect of your breath that maybe you're focusing on. Do you notice temperature, physical sensations in your nostrils, or the movement of your chest? If directing your attention towards your breath is challenging, consider directing your attention on the part of your consciousness that chooses the direction of your attention. What energy do you notice there? Is it clear and focused, or is it distracted? Is it spinning or jagged, or perhaps it is clear and focused? Apply your will to this part of your consciousness. Use your will to steer your attention towards an aspect of your breath. And let go of using your will to direct anything else in your experience. On your own, notice your breath and the behavior of your attention. Remember, the only control we are attempting to exercise is the control of your attention's direction. Notice what happens when you purposefully apply will to your concentration. Notice if your mental field feels more settled. On your own, you're noticing your breath. Now move your attention to your gut area at the belly. What physical sensations do you notice there? Perhaps you notice something less physical, more energetic, a fluttering or a vibration. If you notice your attention drift in another direction, exercise your will and choose to focus on your gut field. Take a step back and notice the part of your mind that focuses your attention. Apply your will to this part of your consciousness. Use your will to steer your attention toward your gut. And let go of using your will to direct anything else in your experience. Can you detect any concerns for change? Can you detect a fear of something in your future changing? How is this fear expressing itself in your gut field? If not, use your gut. Can you detect any concerns for change? Can you detect a fear of something in your future changing? How is this fear expressing itself in your gut field? If you're not noticing anything, your gut may be at peace, not triggered. If this is so, simply stay focused on your gut. If there is a fear, acknowledge this fear. Notice how this concern expresses itself in your gut. It is natural and instinctual to be concerned about change. Consider this possible change in your future, yet also list all that will remain unchanged. Bringing these other events into your life that are in your life and bringing them into your consciousness will help soothe your gut. Notice if this list soothes your gut. If your gut is still affected, consider that if anything will change in the future, it will be in your best interest. Be open to whatever is the best way to soothe your fear of change expressed in your gut field. Now move your attention to your heart area. Move your attention there by repeating, I do not know what will happen with this situation in your life. I do not know what will happen with this event either. Nor do I know the outcome of this situation. Allow yourself to simply not know the answers or the outcomes. Feel this uncertainty. Now that you are settling your consciousness into your heart field, be still and wait and trust. Wait to observe a subtle physical sensation within your heart field. Be still and wait and trust. Be open to the emotions of the heart. Allow these emotions to surface. Notice them. Dwell with them for however long they express themselves to you. With the seesaw between your mind and gut completely still, notice any rhythmic essences in your heart. On your own, continue to notice physical sensations in the heart area, rhythmic essences and emotions that might surface. If you feel your attention drift away from your heart field, notice the part of your consciousness that steers your attention. Use your will to stay focused in your heart field. I will bring this meditation to a conclusion with the sound of the singing bowl. All right, welcome back. A few reminders. If anyone is completing the TSD challenge, bravo, kudos, you have my support. Just a reminder, the TSD challenge is practicing TSD mindfulness for 5 days a week for 30 days. The amount of time that you practice is up to you, but the more time you dedicate to it, obviously, the more benefits you will reap from your practice. And as the 30 days progress, really focus on how your relationships are changing, how your feeling of being connected is changing, and purpose and feelings of irritability, things like that, decreasing, and then feelings of energy increasing. And the tsdmind.org website, just want to remind you of some of the resources on there. On the classes page, there are class notes for each class that you can print out and read, make your own notes on, as well as a link to all the videos for all of the classes. And there are class summaries there as well. And on the classes page is also a donation link. If you are experiencing the classes and enjoying them, please give us a donation through the donation link on the classes page. And there's also a class registration link for future classes. On the teachings page, there's a list of all the teachings and the links to the blog posts that discuss those certain teachings. And I wanted to let you know there's only one more class in this series, the 7th class. All right. Thank you. And as always, feel free to email me at sarah.vallely@outlook.com, or you can contact me through the website. Thank you.